Welcome to another episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investor Podcast. I'm Tom Shawcross. With me, as always, is Mark Ainley. Mark, how are we doing over there?
Good, but I am looking for a director of property management. So anyone listening out there, we're hiring a director of property management for GC Realty and Development to basically oversee the property managers, be manager of managers, basically. So if anyone listening out there knows, or Tom, I know you're unemployed, we can get you in there, get that resume out again. But that and property managers. So if anyone out there, even we offer training as far as assistant property managers coming in, getting going that are not licensed yet and looking just to work in real estate. So we're doing a lot of hiring at GC. So it's pretty exciting. A lot of training that has to follow that is not as exciting, but a lot of the hiring part's the fun part.
If someone's looking to be more of an investor, right? Where's the value of this? Of like, hey, let's say if I go hang my hat at GC for, a couple of years and learn the ropes, like what's the value there? If I'm looking at it just from the investor angle, what's the education that would be beneficial moving forward?
Well, I think what's tough is, so when you get somebody that might be well into their career and they're making six figures, or they're trying to get out of that six-figure career, it's hard to go work into real estate. But if you are younger, or maybe you just don't have that much of a career type oriented job you're holding now, like to work anywhere in real estate, I think has value, whether it be a property management, whether it be in property management, whether it be for another developer. You have a lot of developers like today's guest that they run their own portfolios and they need a couple of people to work for them and work for them, or, even title companies. And just there's so many different spaces you can work in real estate and gather that knowledge. For us, for property management, you get to see the whole back end of what happens the day after it closes, all the way up until the day that the person ultimately sells it. So, and you go through, anyone listening knows all those ups and downs of being a landlord.
Yeah, good stuff, Mark. Let's put the word out there. Let's use this platform. To help you out here.
Nice. Yep, for sure. And then I used LinkedIn as well too. So you guys probably a couple weeks ago at this point, by the time this airs, you saw the LinkedIn post I put over.
By the time this airs, you got someone in the role. We're good.
I am hoping.
We just wasted 2 minutes of everyone's lives. We apologize.
But we are, we're always hiring. So if anyone's ever looking to work in real estate, whether it be leasing or in the operation side or broker side, we're always hiring. So always reach out to me. And if I don't know someone that's looking, then I will point you in the direction of my contacts that might be looking. So I know today's guest, you're a broker. I refer people to Bree Schmidt all the time when they're looking for, if they're not a good fit for us.
Yeah, awesome. What do we got? Housing provider tip of the week.
All right, I am going to be very blunt and honest that I did not come prepared with the housing provider tip today. So as we're talking before the show, our guest today said, I got something for you. And here it is. He recommended the timestamp camera app that you can download iOS. And what it does is it will timestamp and geolocate all of your pictures. So if you need it for, future court date, or if you need it for, just kind of proving when a picture was taken, 5-day notices, if you take a picture of those things, if you're applying for vacancy if you want to apply for vacancy, what's where I'm looking for, Tom? If you're applying for a vacancy factor for appealing your taxes, you could use this as well too. So pretty cool app. I have not downloaded yet, but I will be downloaded tonight for sure.
All right. Awesome. So we got 3 deals to cover today. So let's jump in.
Yeah, for sure. So today's guest, he was a guest on episode 9. He was one of our first ones that we rolled out. So hopefully this episode goes a little smoother than that one did. We're a little more in tune with how to do this, but today's guest is an expert in the Western suburbs. So what I love about John Warren is he knows so much about a specific area. And there's not a person that I talk to that is looking in that, call it 290 corridor, that I don't say, hey, you got to talk to John Warren. And I also love today's guest because what we're going to talk about the investment side of things, his investor portfolio, but he also is a broker, and he just rolled out and is under his own brand now, Presto Properties, and he does a little of everything, and it's pretty exciting. And I always tell people when I meet him, if they're looking at whether it be LaGrange, Westchester, Cicero, Maywood, even going into like Albany Park, I say, listen, if you are going to operate in this area, just connect with John. And I think it's great for John because you never know when you're going to use him down the road. So John also has an awesome monthly meetup too that you can find on our real estate resources for the Chicago meetups as well. So without further ado,
we'll be the guest on. Wait. We got to get our plug in there. John, don't jump in yet. We will be the guest in the one in February.
All right. So we got to make sure this airs before, I think it's the
last Tuesday in February.
Right? All right. So we'll be the guest speaker for him at his meetup then there. But without further ado, John Warren, we're excited to talk to you here today.
Thank you, guys. I'm excited to be back on the show again. This is a real honor. I'm excited to do it.
Well, John, we hold you near and dear to our heart, not only just as a friend, but you were one of the original ones who helped us get this thing off the ground and helped us in many ways. So hopefully this, now that we've 10x the viewership, we get some solid exposure here for you.
No, I'm excited to talk about these deals today. And I know when we were kind of leading up to this, you guys were asking what I've been up to, and I've been up to a lot. November was a busy month, selling a property, doing a 1031 exchange, buying an off market, got rehab property, buying a 12 unit stabilized, lots to talk about. And I'm still sort of digesting all the stuff that I bought in November. So yeah, I'm excited to be here. This is going to be fun.
You've done so much in 2021. I mean, you even you started your own brokerage because you kind of had to. I don't think you wanted to, but you had to legally to be able to manage all these properties under your management arm. But you just did so much, and I don't know. I look at people like you, and you've done so much in 1 year, and hopefully, I'm sure knowing you recognize how much you've gotten done and appreciate what you've accomplished in 1 year. Like people would kill to accomplish everything you did in 1 year.
Yeah, it's definitely a team sport, guys. That's one of the things I've learned. Like Mark, Tom, you guys have both been instrumental to me. Lots of other people have given me advice. There's no way to grow this quickly without having mentors, friends, people in the industry that can help you. So it's definitely a team sport. That's one thing I've learned.
Awesome. So let's dive into these three different purchases that we made, right? So just, spoiler alert, and here's our outline. We have an 11 unit in Bellwood, a 12 unit in Albany Park, a 13 unit in Cicero. Let's just go by each one of these. How'd you come across the deal? Because everyone's sitting here saying, I can't find deals. And you found three of these in, 45-day period or whatever it was. And they're all working for you very well. So let's start with that Bellwood one. Just kind of set the stage there. What led up to that? And let's take it from there.
So the Bellwood deal was actually just an MLS deal. Somebody else had put it under contract and had tried to wholesale it, which is kind of interesting. And so after they stretched that contract period out as long as possible, the sellers were elderly, really stressed out. They were selling as is. There's some violations involved. And when it finally, very first showing, it gave them exactly what they asked for. The listing agent was like, here's where we're at. Here's where the last deal was at. This is where you need to be at. So I wrote an offer for it. It's nothing super creative. The timing worked out well. I was in the middle of a 1031 exchange, so I needed a property that was around the price point this 11 unit was. It literally was a perfect deal for me. It was a new market in Bellwood. I'd never done anything in Bellwood, but I was comfortable. It's close to home. I know the area, some from being a broker, so I've sold there before. And it's actually probably going to turn out to be one of the best deals I've ever done. It's a stable building. It just needed some rental raises and some repairs essentially done for the village. I did do a quick close on it though. So I used a local private money lender that I've used a couple times for bridge debt. So I was able to offer them a quick close as is without wasting a lot of their time. And that obviously is something that the sellers need to hear. The sellers were elderly and sadly one of them passed away a week after closing. So it was one of those situations where they desperately needed to get out of the deal. And it worked out really well for me. It fit into my time structure.
What about the property you sold? Why did you sell that property? I mean, how much equity was worthwhile for you to actually do a 1031? And just kind of walk us through kind of how you led up to doing a 1031.
Yeah, sure. I sold a 9-unit in Berwyn that I owned with two partners. It was one of my first buildings. And the partners were all wanting to do different things, growing in different spaces. And so it just made sense to sell at that point. We were able to sell that Berwyn deal and roll. I mean, I think for me, it was just under 130,000 out of the deal. And so when I bought the Bellwood deal, that was literally the down payment. So it just totally made sense. It was like the perfect size deal for me to 1031 exchange into. It worked really, really well. So it's kind of sad to see that Berwyn 9 flat. I still drive by that building all the time. Very good building, stable, but we got a very strong price for it. And I felt like it was a good time to exit where the partners all made money. Everybody could do different things. And for me, I was able to roll essentially 3 units out of a 9 unit into 11 units. So it's a huge move for me in terms of increasing my portfolio.
Let's talk about that 1031, right? So did you know on the get-go, hey, we're selling this. I know I'm going to have 130K. I have X amount of days. Like, just talk through that process of what needed to be done before you actually sold. And then were you just guns a-blazing looking everywhere to deposit that money somewhere? So
how stressful was it?
For not. Yeah,
how stressful. Like I see people all the time. They're like panicking.
Let's get the oral history of just like, what you were going through at that point.
I'd love to say that I'm cool as a cucumber. I've done 2 1031 exchanges. Both times I was pretty stressed out. It's not that much fun to have 45 days to have to find a property in a low inventory environment. But having been through it many times with clients, I know it almost always works out fine. You just have to open your eyes to different areas and be willing to find a spot to place it pretty quickly. When we were leading up to it, I did know approximately what it would sell for. So I had a pretty good idea of what I needed. So that was good. And, we went under contract on the 9 unit pretty quickly. We used a local commercial brokerage. Quick shout out to Essex Realty. They did a nice job for us. They brought us a buyer pretty quickly and we were under contract. And generally it worked out. The timing worked out really, really well on this one. Much better than my previous 1031 where I was pretty stressed. So it worked out.
Got it. What you said you didn't know Bellwood that well. It was your first purchase up there. Talk through some of our listeners who are like exploring different areas. What are some things you did to get familiar? Like, you just go spend a week there. Who did you talk to? Like, just how did you familiarize yourself to make this a solid investment, or at least become comfortable with the investment?
Yeah, I would say I know Bellwood some. I play basketball there a couple times a week. That's where I play. And so I did a little bit of talking to some of my buddies that live in the area there. It's kind of funny because every time I'm at the building, they see me because they're always driving home or driving different places. So I did a bit of work like that on the ground. In terms of the rental comps and things like that, it was very data driven for me. I did some research on the MLS, pulled up rental comps, pricing comps, and felt like it was a solid deal. What I didn't know is that operationally, the city is not that stressful to work with once you own it. So far, they have been a lot less stressful to deal with than many of the other municipalities. So far, again, it's a caveat. I haven't completely finished all my violations yet, but so far hasn't been too bad. They've been pretty responsive. A property in a new neighborhood, there's always a bit of a learning curve, whether you have rental licensing requirements or different, wholesale requirements you have to fix, the inspection items. You never know exactly how it's going to go, no matter how good of research you do. But I felt comfortable with it. The numbers worked, and it's going to turn out just fine.
Yeah, Bellwood is. You had to do so. Bellwood has a point of sale inspection, and you had like a few months to get the work done, and you usually have to get a lot of permits in Bellwood, or you have to get one permit for a lot of different stuff. Is that kind of your experience you had? Yeah,
so you have to submit the permit pretty quickly. One of the things I've learned, and probably you guys have learned the same, I always try to hire subs that know the area well. So my electrician told me, hey, as long as you get your permit application in, they're pretty easy to work with. They're mostly looking for people who are trying to dodge them. So I didn't dodge. We immediately tried to submit a permit, got it in. They actually still haven't approved the permit. They want to meet there to take a look at the building with me, which I'm totally cool with. I think that'll be better for everybody, so I can do exactly what they want in terms of the repairs. And so that's the thing, like having those on the ground subs that know the neighborhoods, have done jobs there before, I think is a huge, huge thing when you're buying as is in a new neighborhood.
Cool. So you mentioned you hired Essex to sell your building. Is that right?
Yeah. So my partners and I, we interviewed a few different brokerages.
Here, John,
obviously
sorry.
it's Essex.
So I think you said you hired Essex, another brokerage company, to sell your property. We just got over talk about how you're a broker yourself. What led into the decision of hiring someone else? Is it specialty? Is it partnership? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so definitely a combination of the two. There's definitely such a thing as specializations for brokers. And I do some commercial real estate, but I think when you're talking about selling a larger commercial building, the commercial brokerages, this is all they do. They know who the buyers are. They know who the sellers are. Also, this was a partnership deal, and it made a lot of sense for me to just be a partner on this one. It let me kind of just fulfill my role as one of the owners and let somebody else sell it. Being in Berwyn, it's an area that I know really well. And so inevitably it would have been an awkward conversation where people would want to know too many things about the building, and we just want to sell it, maximize our gains, and do our separate things.
Awesome. All right. So we talked about before the show, lessons learned for each one of these projects you went through. What are your 3 lessons you learned on this property?
On the Bellwood one, there are a lot of lessons learned so far. I would have moved a lot faster in terms of getting my permitting together. If I could go back in time, I would have been really aggressive at getting my subs out there to get them in there. That would have expedited the permitting. The other thing I would have done is I would have been more aggressive actually buying in this neighborhood. Now that I own there, I think it's a really good rental market. I feel a lot more comfortable there. It's performing really well so far. And third lesson learned, I would say get all your phone numbers for your tenants. This particular building has a lot of older tenants, and we did not get the phone numbers to the closing. It was a bit of a nightmare for me and my property manager to get in touch with everybody. We still have a couple we're missing. So I think that would have been easy to do at the closing, and we just missed that step.
Gotcha. Bellwood is a very unique market. We've taken over a bunch of properties this year. Just more specifically right now, a couple right over there on St. Charles Road, and I really like it. I think that the tenant base is a lot better than I expected, and the city's on top of their stuff. A couple of pain in the butt things that we've talked about here that they might make you do, they're on top of their stuff for the most part.
All right, so let's move on here. We can talk about this for probably a lot more to dive into, but for the sake of time, you also bought an asset up here on the north side, up by me. A little bit different, right? Everything you've been doing, you're talking about buying something in Bellwood with city violations and value add and distressed, et cetera. Then you turn around and buy something stabilized. So talk to us. How did this come to fruition? So I got a call from one of my buddies who is also a broker, interestingly enough, and a couple of guys that I knew were buying this 12 unit in Albany Park. They asked me if I wanted to manage it. I said, no, I don't do third-party management. Yeah, I talked to Mark, GC Realty. They go, no, we'd be interested in it. And I said, well, only if I'm an owner. So I ended up buying into it. I was very interested for a couple of reasons. Kind of, Tom, what you alluded to. I normally buy value add, and this was a pretty much stabilized asset, had some small value add components that we're doing. But I think the best part about this particular deal is it cash flowed and just had amazing debt that we could put in place. I mean, we were able to use a Freddie Mac non-recourse loan on this deal with a 3% interest only for next 3 years. So, I mean, it's just an incredible loan. It's a great building, fully stabilized, really good rent roll. So that was kind of what excited me about it, was to try a little bit of a different play that is not my normal game plan, knowing that the other partners, that's more their bread and butter. One of them is a lender, one of them is a broker. So they'd already done a lot of the research, and I was just coming in to execute the business plan. So a really exciting play, actually.
By buying something stabilized versus add value, what do you feel you're giving up? And is it less return? Is it less opportunity for appreciation? Like, what's the exchange there?
So one of the things that I've always looked at in the western suburbs where I've bought a lot, especially Berwyn, Cicero, very high tax rates, Bellwood would be the same. If I buy stabilized, normally I'm buying on a trailing financial statement with no cushion built in for the inevitable tax raise that's coming. And I feel like there's a lot of people that are disingenuous about what the real estate taxes are going to look like in a year or two when they buy a building, and brokers will never build that in there. It's interesting, in Chicago, the tax rates are lower. So it's kind of interesting, when people look at the Chicago as a city, they always say, oh, the taxes are high. But, for us, we know these neighborhoods, the suburbs have a lot higher tax rates than the city. So I feel more comfortable buying stabilize in a really good area like this in the city where the tax rate's lower.
12 units, all 12 were occupied when you closed?
Yeah, it was fully occupied. The previous owners had done a value add on the building. So they had remodeled and rented out 10 of the 12 units. So there's a little bit more for us to go on 2 of the units if we decide to turn those in the future. But the rent roll is really strong, and right out of the gate, it cash flows really well.
You sold the last property that we talked about to buy the one in Bellwood, and you had a partnership there. You entered into a new partnership here. Talk to us kind of what your pros and cons of having these partners, and what's kind of your deciding factor if you could do business with people? Because I think a lot of people out there they consider that, but I think there's a fear factor in it, the fear of unknown when it comes to partners.
So that's an interesting question. It's a big question. I think I've been really fortunate. I've had many partners now, and all of them would be good. So I've had no bad partners, for which I'm very fortunate. All ethical, hardworking people that want to contribute to the partnership. I think that when you enter into a partnership, one of the things that's challenging is you don't always 100% control your destiny. So that's one of the things to note. If you're trying to build a portfolio and you have a bunch of partners, they may want to sell. Like this Berwyn deal that I sold that we were talking about from the last transaction it's 6 minutes from my house. So it probably wouldn't be a building that I would normally sell if it was just me that owned it. So that's one of the things to consider. If you're going to go in with partners, you're going to have some less control over your destiny. On the upside, you can take on more risk because you have more people to help with the project. So, all of the partnerships have been good because there's somebody else to take on the risk. And I think the best partnerships are when you have people with different skill sets. I tend to be like the boots on the ground guy. I like to be there meeting the contractors, seeing what's going on, leasing the units. I think the best partnerships that I've had is where maybe one person has had a much better, financial background, more money than me, potentially like a different skill set. Like in this Albany Park deal, one of the partners is a lender. So he was able to run that very challenging debt through the Freddie Mac loan. It would have stressed me out to no end, and he just knocked it out of the park, getting us the best terms possible. So I think when you're looking at partnerships, you have to make sure that you have complementary skill sets for sure.
The boots on the ground partner always has the most control, even though you might only have a percentage, usually not necessarily control, but at least you use the term control your destiny. If you have boots on the ground, you could usually help react to things that are going on the property if you are the boots on the ground guy. So you have these partnerships, and there's another question because I know I get these questions all the time. Are you just drawing up an operating agreement? Are you spelling out that you're the money guy, I'm the boots on the ground guy? Like, how are you going about solidifying this in a legal matter?
Another good thing that happened to me early on is my very first partner. We went through and drew up an operating agreement with an attorney. I've never had a partnership that wasn't done that way. And I think that's super useful. I think a lot of newer investors try to skip those costs early on with the attorney, and that's a big mistake. It's small potatoes in the grand scheme of things if you're going to make money to pay an attorney to drop an operating agreement. So yes, I've always tried to spell out the roles and responsibilities, and you get better at that over time. I think I'm more aware of what I can and can't do now and try to spell that out in operating agreements. But yeah, I've always been very intentional about doing that.
Yep. So John, like obviously you had to park some cash here, right? Like with a lot of value add plays, you put the money in, there's probably a quick recycle. It can depend on the building size, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever, but we feel we'll get majority, if not all of our cash back at some point. Buying something stabilized, the money's going to sit there. What did you give up? Like what was the opportunity cost? What, if you didn't buy the Albany Park building, did you have a place for that money to go? Or was it, hey, I'm sitting on this. I need to make it work.
That's an interesting one. The opportunity cost question. I don't know that I thought of it that way. I am seeing inflation coming, and I'm feeling like every dollar I can invest in a good building at this point is a huge win. And you can only do so many value add projects at a time. I still have, I would say, about 3 active value add projects, which is a lot. So I didn't really need another big drama project in my life just to drive returns. I think it's a good investment. I like the partnership, the building, the debt, the area. It's also diversification a little bit for me outside of the regular haunts, so to speak. So there's a lot of things that I liked about it. And I don't really think the opportunity cost was something that came up for me. I don't think I could have done another value add deal, honestly. Just too many going on at the same time.
Got it. No, it makes sense. I'm kind of in a similar boat. I'm partnering with Jeff Weinberg over at Drexel Properties from buying a stabilized building, which is kind of the first time I'm doing that. And man, like, yes, you park cash, but like to not have to take phone calls of we had this break in, we had this contractor do this, we had the city's doing this. Like you kind of forget like the value add on a spreadsheet and then the value add like emotional toil, right? Like there's just like the additional just BS that goes along with it that people don't really talk about. And it's like, oh, maybe buying some few stabilized things isn't the end of the world here.
That's the value add part. People really underestimate how much it takes to earn that value. All those phone calls you talk about, like
it's not just the rehab number on the spreadsheet and the holding cost. There's just so much more. And when you're doing maybe doing one, it's not that bad, but when you got that's the business, and and Chris takes the brunt of it, but I'm still involved, and it's like, man, like this, you take the brunt of it. It's tough.
The Burr model is what everybody thinks they want to get into. But like you referenced, I mean, there's definitely a place if you can find a property that cash flows, it's in a good area, it's a good building, to just buying it and holding on to it, especially if you have another business or you have a good stream of income. I work with a lot of clients who make a lot of money, and I tell them you don't want to do Burr in a C or D class area. It's going to suck up a lot of your time. You could just make more money at your regular job or business.
Yeah. Did you guys hire management for this just because it's, different clientele?
No. So that's part of what I did very intentionally over the last year. I know Mark had referenced that earlier, but everything is being managed in-house. So Presto Properties manages it all. So we have a full-time manager now, just hired an accountant in-house to do a lot of our bookkeeping and 1099s and all that good stuff. And just trying to build out that internal management, vertically integrated is the goal.
No, he's got a nice little setup over there. I think as an investor, when you start getting to that, you started considering this, you're doing all the legwork yourself up until 30, 40, and then you need to start bringing people in or hire a whole nother company. And I think the best way to kind of control that stuff is to kind of build an in-house team. And you can do it really efficiently now. Correct me if I'm wrong. You have a couple of people that are virtual, a couple of people are remote, and then you have a couple of people boots on the ground that are kind of doing it all.
Yeah, I'm really fortunate starting up my operations that I have the brokerage team as well. So I have 2 licensed agents that work with me. So they can take up some of the heat from things like leasing, for instance, which would be a challenging one. And I do have a remote property manager. Thanks to Mark, he made a really good introduction. He's been awesome. And I have a remote accountant as well. She's remote. And my CPA actually introduced my accountant. So I think that's one of the things that kind of blew me away as I was learning more about how property management works in today's day and age. You can get incredible people if you're willing to think about global talent. There's so much talent out there. But the one thing I don't have yet is a full-time on-the-ground property manager. So at the end of the day, the buck still stops with me. So I still go to these buildings a lot. That's the reality. I'm still in these value add projects. There's still a lot of stuff that happens on the ground, whether it's evictions or bed bugs or cockroaches or roof leaks. I mean, I'm still seeing a lot of that on the day to day.
John, anyone that knows you good enough that's listening to this knows there's some control factors that you can't let go of either there.
1,000%. Isn't that important though, Mark? I mean, you probably have dealt with owners like that before. Some owners should manage their own properties, and I've used property managers before. I'd say I've used 4 different property managers, and 2 were really bad, 2 were solid. And, I appreciated the value that they brought, the property managers that did a good job for me. But it was really hard for me because as I built things out, it just made more sense for me to stay in charge of it and keep it in-house. But that's not going to be the case for everybody. If you're going to be stressed out by that, tenant you're evicting that's blowing up your phone Saturday night at 10 o'clock at night, then you probably should outsource that function. It doesn't stress me out the way it does some people anymore. But yeah, don't get me wrong. There's things that do stress you out though, for sure.
Well, GC was none of those 4. So
no, it was not.
So let's wrap up Albany Park here because we want to get into the third one and we're running short on time. Lessons learned for Albany Park 12 unit.
It's a lot easier buying a stabilized property. We already kind of said that earlier, but there was even a point where I was talking to the manager, Sam, who works for me, and I was like, wow, property is a lot easier. Everybody pays mostly on time. We sent out a rent raise notice. It was like no big deal. Like here's your lease, DocuSign back to you. Buying in a nicer area is a lot easier to manage. And I think that your risk really is lower. I think that's one of the things that's missed the people that look at the cap rates. I guess that would be the second thing is sometimes we look at these lower cap rate areas and we go, oh, the returns are not as good. Those high cap rates come with some real brain damage. So that'd be the other lesson learned. Last lesson learned, it's a little different dealing in the city than with the suburbs. I knew that, but there's still lots of little hiccups when your operation is geared towards the suburbs. Like we had to remember to use the car lease instead of the suburban lease that we'd been using. So we had to redo the DocuSign. All of the utilities are a little different, different gas company, things like that. So there was a little bit of a learning curve going from the suburbs into the city, whereas probably a lot of investors have gone from the city into the suburbs. So that was the other lesson learned. Kind of prep better for some of those things.
One caveat there on buying the stabilized building. People buy stabilized buildings thinking they're stabilized and they're really not. So I imagine you did a lot of due diligence on these tenants and asked for a million things in a turn review. So that's, I just want to point out that's very important. There's a lot of people that can go buy a 12-unit building that they think is stabilized, and they have 3 people that aren't paying, 2 people that have these different issues. And there's a lot of due diligence when you're buying, especially nowadays, buying what we call occupied stabilized properties.
100%.
Cool. Let's move on to the last deal.
Sure.
So, yeah, this was a 13-unit deal in Cicero. And interestingly enough, this was a deal that I was planning to buy before the Bellwood one popped up. So I actually got wind of this through another commercial broker. And he said this to me. He said, hey, I've been working this listing for a long time. I'm pretty sure that the seller is just going to sell this to a family member. Do you want to write an offer? I said, absolutely, man. So we wrote an offer, actually drove over with an earnest money check to the attorney's office, somebody I know there in Berwyn. And they're like, we can't take this. We have a contract. It's like, oh, darn it. So let it go, figured it was gone. And I was in the middle of my 1031 exchange. And as soon as I put the Bellwood one under contract, lo and behold, the 13-unit shows back up. It's available. They got the Cicero compliance inspection back. It was as brutal as you would expect because this building had been truly like kind of not taken care of for a while. The tenants hadn't paid rent much, from what I can tell, during the moratorium. So we ended up putting it under contract, sight unseen, just drove the outside, never looked at the inside, and put it under contract, closed on it without ever really seeing anything other than a couple of the vacant units. So we didn't really see a whole lot in the building. But I know the unit layouts really well because we own a 20-unit 3 blocks down that has all the exact same unit layouts. I know what the rent comps are 100% because I'm the one leasing there. It's really in an area that I'm very confident in. So able to close, and again, did a quick close, used our private money lender. So we did a 2-week close, got a substantial discount on the price because of that as well. And it's a full blown gut rehab. So we are in the middle of that right now. It's not pretty yet. There's a lot of demolition done, and there's a lot of work to be done before this is going to be, good affordable housing again for the community.
Give us some numbers. You bought it off market. You used the word substantial. Like, what does closing quick? What was the benefit here of doing that?
So it's funny. When we first looked at it, I think they wanted $540 for this building for 13 units. And I was willing to pay that. And the way that we structured it, because the seller was not willing to pay the broker. So I said, sure, I'll pay your commission on this, 5% commission. When they didn't take that and it came back, I was talking with my lender, Jan, Armitage Street. I can throw out another name out there for you guys. And he goes, why don't you offer a lower price, John? Just do a quick close. You know this neighborhood. You know what your numbers are. And I was like, that's a good idea. So we did. We offered $500 with a 2-week close, as is, where is, no contingencies. And they were like $510. I was like, great deal. So that's how we did it. We got a nice discount, about a $30,000 discount because we did a quick close. And those dollars add up, holding costs. And this is one of those projects where the holding costs are going to be pretty rough for the first 6 months because it's not at all performing. Most tenants are not paying. The utilities are really high because all the windows are broken. So the boiler, is just heating the outside. It's pretty brutal.
I mean, go ahead, Mark.
What were the risks you're assessing? What risk were you assessing when you made the conscious decision to say, I'm okay walking with through two units? Walk me through that mindset.
Well, because we're doing such a substantial renovation, we're planning to gut reno the whole thing. So the budget is such that it doesn't really matter the condition of the units because we're going to do the same thing. We're going to rip it all out anyway. So whether or not we can save hardwoods or we have to do vinyl plank over the top doesn't really change the ending that much to me. I was able to see from the outside that it needed a full concrete patio, a whole new set of porches, all the windows, the tuck pointing. The roof ended up being a happy story. It was in much better shape than we expected. But I knew in general it was going to be a full rehab. So I know for any of you who have done rehabs before, it's at the end of the day, it's a box at that point. If you're doing the plumbing, the electrical, the HVAC, the kitchens, the baths, what else is there to really be worried about? Just bad tenants at that point. So that's kind of where we ended up is there, it's just a play where we have to completely renovate the building. There is enough pest infestation and plumbing problems and things like that, that there was nothing really to save with those systems.
Got it. So John, like, sounds like a wonderful purchase price, right? Under 40 grand a door. Roughly, if you don't mind sharing, what are you guys going to be putting into this? And then what's a good, like, I'll say ARV or the 20 unit you referenced, like, what is something like that trade at for a door? Like, what spread have you created or projected to create here?
Yeah, it's funny. We're going to put somewhere between 25 and 30,000 per unit into this, which is a pretty substantial number. But even that is being done on a tight budget to get it to that number. So one good thing is right down the street, another deal that I know of is getting ready to close at around 75,000 a door. It's nowhere near as stabilized as our product will be. So, we'll be one of the nicest buildings in the area for sure. The ARV, that's a good question. There's a really interesting niche that I've kind of found with multifamily that's 5 units or more. If you can get your loan to $1 million or more, which means your ARV has to be 1.25 million or better. You can go to these non-recourse Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loans, and if you're in these areas that are considered like workforce housing, there's a fancier name they have for them, but essentially like affordable housing. They'll give you amazing terms, 80% loan to value right off the bat. So the game plan here is to refinance out as soon as we can. You need 1 month of stabilized income and operations. So, and before you start the process. So, in about 9 months, hopefully we can start that process, put new debt on the property and get all or most of our money back. That's kind of the game plan.
Got it. So you need this thing, if we're talking to 80% LTV, just to like carry this forward for our listeners, you need this thing to appraise out at like 1.25 ish, right? Like that's the magic number where you can carry debt service at about $1 million and qualify for the more favorable financing.
Correct. Yeah. And I think we will. So because we're doing such a substantial rehab, we're doing a few things to drive the net operating income up. We are putting in forced air heat and taking out the boiler. We're putting in separate hot water tanks. We're shifting a lot of those expenses off of us to the tenant, the future tenant, which is pretty easy to do when you're doing a full gut. Not easy to do though if you're working with existing condition. So that's going to allow us to get the value add bump we need. The other thing we're going to do, which goes back to the value of team. I walked my general contractor through there. He is with Modus Construction, which is an arm of Pangea. He's done just millions of these kind of buildings. He walks into one of the units and he goes, "We can convert this to a 2-bedroom." I go, "Whoa!" So 3 of the 1-bedrooms can be easily converted to 2 bedrooms, which will give us about a $250 to $300 per unit bump on a monthly basis, which obviously helps your NOI a lot once you get it stabilized. So we're doing a few things like that too that are going to really help us get our value at the other end.
Got it. And are you completely vacant now? I know there was tenants in there when you bought. Because I mean, this the other thing is juggling all of this. Did you had to potentially look at tenants like, "Hey, we're looking to do this rehab. Here's a cash for keys number." Are people actually trying to stay in there through the rehab? How are you juggling this?
We've done projects before, and I love when we can keep existing tenants. This particular building ended up where that just wasn't going to be feasible. We actually were going to do that originally, but the pest infestation was pretty bad. I personally have never seen this many cockroaches in one place as in one of the units. It was pretty gross. So we just made the executive decision to give everybody 60-day notices, which is the new thing you have to do in Cook County this month. So we are still about half occupied, to answer your question. And we're going to offer incentives. I don't even want to call it cash for keys because it's not an eviction. We're just going to offer people incentives if they want to get out early. Say, "Hey, like this, we're not happy with the product here that we're providing. We'd rather help you find a new spot." That way we can all accomplish our goals. We can gut these units and get them back to a safe living condition, and you can find a new place that doesn't have cockroaches, that's not nasty. So that's our goal right now. We do have a few evictions, unfortunately. Anybody that doesn't work with you, you don't have a lot of options. But anybody that we can work with, that's the goal always, to keep the conversation going.
So I always run into the issue, or I see other investors run into the issue too, when you have these lower rents, call it between 600 and 800, and the conditions aren't that great, or the building's not that great, where they're getting a substantial discounted rent, and you're trying to come in and increase that rent drastically. I have a hard time getting some of those people to move because they know they're not going to be relocating for the same. They're not going to be able. They'll have to go pay 1,100 somewhere to get something similar. How'd you get around those issues?
It's not easy. Kind of like you referenced, Mark. That's the value add part that nobody puts in a spreadsheet. You have to have these difficult. I've heard them called kitchen table conversations, because you're right. Like if you're paying $800 or $900 for a 2-bedroom apartment with heat included, that's not even sustainable. Like owners can't even pay the bills at that point. But for a tenant, you might think, man, why am I going to pay $300 or $400 more a month to live somewhere else? So it's always a difficult conversation. So far, I've been blessed or lucky, and I haven't had a lot of problems where when we've given people notices, they've given us problems. In previous projects, one of the things we've done is we've moved people into occupied units if we feel like the building is such that we can demo units successfully and provide a better housing product. But yeah, this particular one is just tough. The conditions are so poor.
I bought a building at a tax auction in 4 years ago, and the tenant was paying it was like $800 in a mortgage, and we should never get her move out. Older person, didn't wind up on the news, and she's literally still in our unit 4 years later, paying $1,000 when our market rate could probably be $7. We perhaps put some rehab into it, but we've always struggled with the ability to remove her. Her family owned it for 40 years before that. So just a quick note to investors out there: keep that in mind. I got a text yesterday, guys. Like, I love this house. Tenant's only paying $1,300. You think we get $1,800? I'm like, yes, you get $1,800 all day. Once you get that person out, that person's not gonna be able to go find that same house that they've been living in for 7 years anywhere close. So you're gonna have a hard time getting them out. And this was in Cook County, it was in Chicago. So it was, it's one of those situations where it's like, you have to either negotiate the person to leave at closing, or you have to be prepared to collect that $1,300 for the next couple of years. So I think it's a real thing right now.
And it's also their life, right? Do you really want to be the person that this is your full-time job going in there and saying, hey,
yes,
here's 60 days, get out? Yeah, we have to have difficult conversations once in a while, but man, it's, that is not the way to continually do business, I feel.
Yes, no, I agree. There's some humanity issues there that I was talking about with this investor that called me yesterday. Like, hey man, you just can't come in. These people have been there. This is their family. They had Christmas there a couple of weeks ago. You got to take those things into consideration. Great deal. Maybe you could, even if you let them, you kind of did it on a 2-year time period, and you kind of let them out slowly. But even then, they're not going to want to leave 2 years from now. So it's tough. You got to take those considerations as an investor when you're looking at a deal.
Yeah. So John, let's talk about some lessons learned here.
Lessons learned on this deal. I wish, it's funny that we just got done saying how it's nice to let people stay there longer. We tried to do that for too long here. I think we should have just immediately told everybody that we needed to clear the building out. The building, as we got into it, was just worse and worse and worse. We got our first heating bill. It was over $2,000 for a month. And I was like, this is not sustainable. At one point we thought maybe we'll keep the boilers. We can do the play where we move people in between units and things like that. But I think number one lesson learned for me is when you're doing a gut rehab project, just be upfront with the tenants and tell them as much as possible that this isn't going to work. Because this building was rough, man. One of the worst. I think I texted a picture to Mark at one point, and he asked me if the porches were from a third world country because it looks
Yeah, I remember that. It looked very third world what you sent me that day.
Yeah, pretty sad, right? This is just a pretty sad spot.
Cool. Well, you were busy. Are we keeping on this trajectory this year? Am I going to talk to you in 60 days and be like, yeah, I purchased another 30 units?
That's a good question. I think my goal for Q1 is to finish digesting all of the buildings that we took over. We didn't even talk about the 20 unit deal from July. So there was a huge ramp up in the amount of units we're managing. And I feel for property managers every day because I realize how hard it is when you onboard a new building and how much just death by 1,000 paper cuts. So I want to make sure we're doing a great job at the projects we're doing in Q1. And obviously with the new brokerage, there's a lot going on there too in the back end. So my goal for Q1 is more about stabilization of these buildings at this point and getting everything kind of rolled out and running the way it should be.
Awesome. Awesome. What do you got on the forefront for your networking group in 2022? Are you remote? Are you local? Like, tell us about what you're planning for that.
We were just getting ready to think about going back local. And then, of course, Omicron came storming into the US. And with all the vaccine mandates and things, I just don't think I can be the vaccine police. So we're going to stay remote for the next few months until this kind of blows over. Hopefully it blows over, right? Hopefully by the time this airs, it's all over. But that's the goal right now, is staying remote. The remote group has done really, really well this past year. And it was interesting. We went in person for a while in the city, which is kind of funny for a suburban group because we couldn't find a suburban location. And our audience actually preferred to be on Zoom as opposed to going into the city. So we're going to stay remote for a bit longer.
Yeah, I'll tell you this, the virtual ones, it's great. If you're bored, you just turn off your camera or you leave. Like, you don't have to like take I drove all the way here, I should do it. So it's good and bad. You're forced to do things in person, maybe network more, but the virtual, you'll probably show up to more.
I just wish that I could meet people in the same capacity as the in-person ones. I really miss in-person networking. I think it's a huge thing. I've gained so much value and met so many fantastic people at networking groups here in the city and in the suburbs. And I'm looking forward to going back in person at some point, but I know it's just a lot with the vaccine mandate. Restaurants are going to be kind of under the gun again. I think this isn't the right time. So keep it remote for the foreseeable future with the idea to pivot back once it makes sense.
Awesome. You got some great guests coming in February, so that's exciting.
The best.
But all right, awesome. Let's move to the wrap up. You ready, Tom?
I'm ready.
All right, awesome. So John, you've asked these questions in a different capacity, so I'm going to reword them a little right now, but your competitive advantage, you really talked about 3 of your many deals you did last year. And these 3 deals all had crazy hair on them, different scenarios. Like, people would love to do what you're doing. How are you able to accomplish this type of deal flow, this type of rehabs, when other people wish they could?
I feel like deal flow comes back to people. Real estate is a people business. And it's funny, I was just talking with another friend of mine, and he was talking about off-market deals. And I was like, I'm getting all my deals from other brokers. So I've just been focusing on talking to other brokers. Their job is to find sellers and buyers and hook them up. And I tell them what I'm looking for and stay in touch and try to be a good buyer. Like the Cicero deal, I was the best buyer for the broker. I guaranteed his commission, paid his commission, made sure he was taken care of. And that's, for the deal flow part of it, that's been huge.
Nice. And just point that out there. You're not on these, when you're working with these brokers, your goal isn't to get a commission as a broker yourself. Your goal is to get the deal and use the commission as some sort of negotiating tool, right?
It's funny you say that. I did not do that with, I paid the commission for the 13 unit Cicero out of my own pocket. There was no commission coming from the seller. I did not have any kind of commission from the 12 unit either. That another broker that was not one of the partners got paid a commission, a nice commission. And the Bellwood one, I did get a commission. That's actually only the second time it's ever happened to me. That's not like a main driving objective for me in having my license. And I think that that's a mistake a lot of newer investors get, is they think, oh, these dumb brokers, I can just skim off the top and get rid of their commission. If a broker brings you a good deal, like, pay them a commission so they bring you another good deal. That's what you really want. They're doing all the hard work of finding that great deal that you get to profit from.
Yeah, that's a short-term mindset versus a long-term mindset. And sometimes you got to learn that one the hard way.
Yeah, agree so heavily on this one. I mean, we, on our end, anyone who brings us a deal that we're going to flip, we not only give it to them, but then we give it to them on the back end as well, which is like almost worth like 3 times the amount of deal because we do such an extensive rehab. So they can either bring us one deal, and it's almost like bringing another guy 4, if that makes sense. Like,
totally.
just from a time commitment standpoint, and like no strings attached.
But for you, getting that deal initially, having the opportunity to be the guy that flips that house and makes that money is so valuable. And it's so hard to find those deals. That's the hardest part of the business.
Correct. So, and there's no reason to mess around there. Like, go ahead and give them, pay, Mark's who, not how here. Pay everyone, you get paid, everyone's happy.
100% of 0 opportunities is 0.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's, I don't want to rant here, but like, people give me like slack, and it's like, it's someone who doesn't own a building. And I'll be like, what? Why are you telling me how I structure my partnerships?
It's a mistake I used to make as a newer investor, sadly, hoping that my lender made nothing, my agent made nothing, my contractor made nothing. Now, as a hopefully more mature investor, I want my property manager to make money. I want my contractor to make money. If not, they're not going to come back and do more business with you. So it's a foolish way to think about it, right? If you're always trying to kind of get one over as a quick gotcha,
Now you just buy buildings and kick people out. So
not if we can keep from it.
I'm joking. You have some bad living exterior. You're actually probably bettering these people's lives by making them leave in their scenario. So
yeah, cool. If you saw the cockroaches, you would agree. It's a sad thing when you see buildings to get to that level. It's such a bad building that several of the older investors in the neighborhood knew the building already when I mentioned it to them. And they're like, oh, it's been like that for a long time. So kind of sad, you know?
Damn. So, John, what is one piece of advice you would tell someone that is yet to buy their first property here in Chicagoland?
Build your team. You know, talk to somebody like Mark, talk to somebody like Tom, you know, a broker, a lender. Have a local team here on the ground. I think it's common sense in a lot of ways to us who've been doing this for a while, but there are so many fantastic people here in Chicago. I've worked with a few clients recently who maybe have a lender from out of state or something. I mean, just build your team here locally. There's phenomenal market here and tons of great real estate professionals.
All right. What do you these days? What do you do for fun?
I still play basketball for fun. Doing 2 days a week right now because apparently when you're 37, your body hurts if you do 3 days a week. Now I understand why all those NBA guys retire when they're 35, but I still play basketball pretty regularly with a really cool group of guys that play Monday, Wednesday, Friday at the center in Bellwood, 5:30 a.m. So it's a good group of guys if they're getting up at 5:30 a.m.
Nice. There you go. What is a good book, podcast, or self-development activity that you would recommend to our listeners?
So when it comes down to podcasts, one of the podcasts that I really enjoy is the Get Rich Education podcast. It's a real estate podcast, but the host, Keith Weinhold, I think is a just interesting person. Sadly, I probably will never buy anything that he sells because he does like a turnkey rental. I think it's kind of his business model. But I just really enjoy the guests he has on, the mindset. I think there's a lot of really good mindset stuff I've been able to glean from that podcast.
Nice. Besides yourself, and you got to get somebody different than you did last time. Name one person in your network that you'd highly recommend to other investors.
I'm going to go with Jan Pisatsky, Armitage Street. They are a private money or hard money, whatever you want to call it, lender that have done 3 deals for me now. Very quick, very easy to work with. They will only work with experienced investors, but if you've done a deal or two, they will do a deal with you, and they're fast, which is really valuable sometimes when you need to close fast.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know our friends at Renovo say the same thing. You know, we are a tool in the toolbox, right? It's not for every deal, but man, when you need it, it's imperative to have it there so you can use it.
100%.
All right, John, thank you so much. You provide a ton of value to the listeners. How can they learn more about you? Is there any way they can provide value to you?
Yeah, I should be pretty easy to find. I'm all over Bigger Pockets. I try to post in there 5 to 10 times a day. You can also find Presto Properties Chicago is the website. And you can just text my cell if you want to get a hold of me, 847-894-2433. I'm pretty available.
All right, Mark, we got to get big enough where people stop giving out their cell. That's like a measuring stick for us. Yeah. I can't do that. These guys are national. All right. We wrap with a fact here. So let's see. I'm going to put you at 50-50 on this one, Mark. If I'm setting the odds. Multiple choice. John, I'll let you chime in as well. So we mentioned one of the deals was in Albany Park. I know you're kind of close to that Ravenswood Manor area, but and I'll give you multiple choice. What is the farthest north, east-west running street within the Albany Park community limits? And I'll give you multiple choice here. Is it Carmen, Argyle, Foster, or Bryn Mawr?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
I would say Bryn Mawr.
I was leaning towards Bryn Mawr as well.
No, it's Foster. I threw it in there.
I would not have said Foster. Would have been it would not have been my even second choice. All right, that was way off.
I would have guessed Foster or Bryn Mawr just based on them being actually every 4 block busy street. So that's where my head would have gone.
All right.
Oh man, I ended on a downer. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah, I got a couple in a row that I missed. So I gotta maybe. I don't know. I can't even prepare for it even. So it's even a struggle, but
it's kind of a gamification. If you get a few in a row, I just make the questions harder. Yeah. It never lets you get comfortable.
All right. I see where we stand. Perfect. Expectations are lower now for level of disappointment. So John, thank you for coming back again. Exciting to hear everything you're working on. You're a great value to the Chicago community, and you have been huge for helping me out with various things and clients. So I definitely appreciate your friendship and the friendship for the podcast. Tom, thank you as always. Listeners, please, if you like today's show, which you better say you did, please leave us a 5-star review. Actually, also check out our Facebook group. We get a lot of chatter going back and forth on different opportunities on there. So we will hopefully see you on there. John, thank you again. Tom, thank you. All the listeners, we'll see you next week.
Thanks all.